Minister Senator Mitch Fifield live from Canberra. Thanks very much for being there, Senator.
G'day, Peter. Good to be with you.
Right off the bat, well, firstly, congratulations. I don't think we've spoken since your promotion to Cabinet.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, though, when are you going to fix the archaic, the outdated, the no longer relevant various media laws that are restricting the ability of the sector to move with the times?
Well, you're right, Peter. Our media laws were designed for the pre-digital age. They don't really reflect anymore the way that contemporary media operates. They don't really reflect the way that consumers access their media and information. So what has been raised with me over the 4 or 5 weeks that I've been the Minister for Communications primarily is the 75% audience reach rule and also what's known as the 2 out of 3 rule. These really do reflect a bygone era and ultimately it's going to be consumers and it's going to be technology that bit by bit, day by day renders media law increasingly redundant and ultimately will render it irrelevant. So what I've been doing over the short time I've been Minister is meeting with stakeholders, getting their perspectives, seeing if we can reach a broad consensus and look, I think there's the possibility of that. I don't think we'll ever reach unanimity, but there's a strong desire across the sector for the media laws to be reformed so that they reflect the world that we live in.
Senator, can we borrow into some of that? Because I had Jason Clare on the Sunday program on the weekend just past. It sounds like the 75% reach rule is one that you could get whiz-bang through the Parliament as quick as you like. It sounds like Labor are on board with that. My question for you, I suppose, is your desire to couple it with a change to the 2 out of 3, or would you look at the 75 reach rule all on its own?
Well, 75% reach and 2 out of 3 are the two rules or media laws that are most often raised with me and most often pointed to as really being inhibitors and not recognising the way that the media landscape is in Australia today.
But do you need to change them together, I guess is really my question, because it sounds like Labor would happily change the 75% reach rule. They're less clear on the 2 out of 3 by the sounds of it. Do you see them as a double act, or would you be prepared to change one and then look to negotiate on the other one, irrespective of whether you ultimately were able to get away with the change or not?
Well, I guess ultimately, wearing my manager of government business in the Senate hat, I've got to be pragmatic. I'd like there to be significant reform, but ultimately it will be the Parliament in the form of the Senate that will determine what actually is able to be done. So what I want to do, in addition to talking to the stakeholders in the industry, is spend some time talking to my parliamentary colleagues, and obviously that includes crossbench colleagues at all as well. So we want to follow an orderly process here. We want to follow a good cabinet government process as well. So I'm not going to preempt at this point what the shape of a reform package might be, but obviously I'm someone who's a pragmatist and deals in the real world of the Australian Senate.
Well, if I can read between the lines, it sounds to me like you're going to try to do it all, but if you can't, you'll then recalibrate and think about it bit by bit, but that's not your first priority. Maybe I'm verbaling you, I hope not. The other issue then, I guess, is timing. Is this something that you think we're likely to see, albeit at the end of a good cabinet process, before the end of the year, or is media reform going to more likely be packaged up and be on the agenda next year in an election year?
Look, I haven't set a time frame as yet. To some extent that will be a function of the discussions that I have with the stakeholders and also with my parliamentary colleagues, but there's no doubt that there is a growing momentum on the issue of media reform. There's no doubt that there's a growing desire on the part of numbers of parliamentary colleagues for our media laws to better reflect the world that we live in, and you'd be well aware that regional TV providers are particularly keen for this area to be addressed. So there's a lot of support for change change. There's growing momentum, and I'm not someone who wants to let the grass grow on this issue.
So you're optimistic, could I put it that way? You're optimistic that you might be able to do something this side of the new year?
Well, look, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I don't want to state a time frame as yet, but I can indicate that this is one of the issues which is on the top of my agenda.
Okay, great. Now the other issue is anti-siphoning. I know that this is a more difficult one, and obviously the disclaimer that we're sitting here on Sky News on Foxtel, which as a platform is very interested in anti-siphoning, no more so I guess than the free-to-air television networks are as well. But the digital age has changed this, hasn't it? Because whilst there are less things on the list of anti-siphoning, there are also more platforms from which the free-to-air channels can show the various sports broadcasts. Is there a plan or a thought process around reducing the amount of things on anti-siphoning because of the greater variety of platforms that now exist on free-to-air?
Yeah, well, I think that there are a few misconceptions about the anti-siphoning arrangements. The anti-siphoning arrangements don't, for instance, mandate that free-to-airs have to purchase nationally significant events, and it doesn't even mandate that if they do purchase those nationally significant events that they've got to show them. So I think there's a bit of misunderstanding abroad about what the anti-siphoning regime actually does. But I think there's no doubt that there is a community consensus on the need to have nationally significant sporting events likely to be available on free-to-air TV, and that's something as a government that we support. From time to time, there are events that come onto and go off the anti-siphoning list, and there are some unusual things, such as the fact that I have to make a ministerial determination if a free-to-air wants to premiere an event on one of their secondary channels rather than one of their primary channels, and that's something that happens fairly routinely. I'm not saying that there can't be some change to the anti-siphoning arrangements, but I think that it is important that there still be nationally significant events available on that list to give the public confidence that those events that they really love in sport will still be available to them.
And I suspect most people would absolutely agree with you on that. What about this, though, as a question, I suppose a final question, Senator? Your package, whether we see it this year or next year, is that going to have an array of things in it beyond the two main ones, the 2 out of 3 rule and the 75% reach? So, for example, is anti-siphoning part of that? Are there other elements to it that we can expect, or is it really going to focus on the core business of those two areas that most people seem to agree need to be re-looked at?
Well, I haven't flagged as yet what may be the elements of a media reform plan. That's because I'm still in the process of talking to the key players, talking to my parliamentary colleagues, and we do have to follow good cabinet and party room processes. But I've indicated that these are amongst the range of issues which are being raised with me, which are being pointed to. But I should emphasise, Peter, that in relation to anti-siphoning, we do have a commitment that nationally significant sporting events will remain on that list. I don't want to cause anyone undue concern on that issue, but there may be some things that we can do around the edges in relation to that. But look, eventually our media laws are going to become redundant, so it's entirely appropriate that as a government we take a look at them, check that they're fit for purpose, check that they reflect the world that we currently live in. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, Senator Mitch Pfeiffer, again, congratulations, and we appreciate your time on Newsday. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Good to be with you.